In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to build a custom audio cable which has a 3.5mm jack on this end and two mono 1/4" jacks on the other end. So this is my Yamaha P-200 Electronic Piano, and I keep it permanently connected up with a computer, which I keep down here. On the back of the piano there are input and output jacks for sending the audio signal in and out, and they take these full-size 1/4" mono jacks, and I want to connect that up with the back of the computer, which use these 3.5mm jacks here, and they use stereo jacks. So to be able to connect the inputs and outputs from the piano to the computer, I'm going to need to make two of these cables. So I've already made this one, so now I'm going to demonstrate how I build the second one. So I bought the supplies for this from a local electronics store. I've got two 1/4" jacks. These are actually stereo jacks, but I'm going to solder them and make them into mono jacks. And I've also got a stereo 3.5mm jack and a piece of cable, which is audio video cable, which has a white wire and a red wire, and then a grounding shield which goes around the outside. So 3 wires, 3 conductors, which should be perfect for what I need for this. I'm also going to use a small piece of wire from this old cable here, which is just 2 conductor, so that I can connect that second mono jack along with the first one. I chose these 90-degree flush mounting jacks because it'll make it easier to push this up against the wall. But the one problem is that they're a little bit wide, and if I try and plug 2 of them in side by side, there actually isn't enough room in there. But what I'll do first is I'm going to file off one side on each of these, and that'll enable them to be plugged in there together. So I did the same to both jacks, and now when I try and plug this in, you can see that those are both able to fit in there without overlapping. So while I'm working on this, I've drilled a couple holes in a piece of wood so I can stick these in there, and that'll help me hold on to them while I'm working on them. So I'll start by removing the screws for both sides, just using a small slotted screwdriver. Inside each one there are these red pieces of paper, which I assume are used for protecting the contacts here from not touching the top, which will be grounded. So this here is going to be the right side jack, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire the red wire here in the very middle up with the center, the very end part of the jack, which will correspond on the jack with this part here. This other part here would be for if I was using this as a stereo jack, but since I'm using it as a mono jack, I'm just going to solder the connection to this part here up with the connection that goes with here, which is the ground connection. So inside here, this part here in the very middle, that corresponds with the tip of the jack, and this part here corresponds with that part that's halfway along. So I'm actually going to solder my ground to this pin here, and then I'm going to solder that wire also to the underneath of this, so it'll be connecting up with the ground. So I now need to strip back some of the insulation from this wire, so I'll be able to do that. So just holding that up on there, I know I'm going to need to be able to thread part of that red wire through there. So holding that up on there, I'll know that I need to strip it back about as far as about right here approximately. And I'm just going to do that with a utility knife, very gently cutting through all the way around. And then just twisting. And there we go, we've got it exposed. So this outside here, that's going to be the ground, and then on the inside, there's a little bit of foil. Inside the foil, there are some strings, which I guess I assume are used for kind of strain relief on the cables, and then on the inside, there's a red and a white wire, and I'm pretty sure the convention is that you normally use red to be the right side, because red starts with R and so does right. And then the white will be used for the left. So I'm going to be using this wire here. It's actually going to go into that smaller piece of wire that I have here, and then that's going to go across and loop over to the other side for the left side, and that'll connect up with the center pin or the end tip on the left side jack. And since I don't need this string or this foil anymore, I'm just going to very carefully clip those off with a pair of scissors. Get those out of our way. I'll do the same with the foil as well. And then the ground here, because I'm going to be sending some of this over to the other cable, I'm going to break this into 2 different sections so that I'll be able to use it for both applications. So as you can see, I've twisted the ground into 2 separate sections here like that, and now I'm going to strip back a little bit from both of the white wire and the red wire. And then I'll just twist those ends so they will stay nice and tidy as well. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to thread this ground piece through this little hole that's right there, and just to do that I'm going to bend this up a little bit very carefully like so. And then I'm just going to thread this part up and through there. Alright, so I've got that threaded through there like that. I might clip off some of that extra end, but now I've got to thread this red one through the other little loop that's right there. So now I've got to get the other piece of cable ready for linking this jack up with the other one for the left side jack. So I'll just strip off some of the insulation from the end for connecting these together. So this piece of wire is going to come up through the side beside that other one, and the ground is going to connect up with this extra piece of ground that I have left over here, and the center wire on here, it's going to connect up with the white wire on here and then get connected over to the other side. So I need to strip off about this much here, so that it'll come back to around here as well, similar to the other side. Alright, so it'll be something like that. Ground separated. Now I'm going to use my wire strippers again to strip off the insulation for this center part here. So now the center part here will connect up with the white wire, so I'll just twist those two together. And then I'll connect this other part over here up with the other ground, which is over here. Alright, so now I've made all the connections that I need to make in here. I will now get my soldering iron heated up and solder all those connections. So before I actually solder these, I'm going to put some flux on the connections so that the solder will flow a little bit better. I'm going to start by soldering this joint here because it's kind of at the bottom and I want to kind of get it done first. So with my soldering iron and a little bit of solder, I'm going to heat this connection up here and apply a little solder to that. Like so. And because I want to fuse this part here with the ground, with the part below, I'm going to use my screwdriver and push down on this while I'm melting the solder. So melt it so that it will then fuse with the section below there, and take my soldering iron off while it cools. Alright, so next I'll join this connection here with the one which is going over to the left wire. So that one will be quite a bit easier. Just drop a little bit of solder on there and let it get into all the fibers. That should be a good connection. I'll now do the same with the red connection here, and I'll go ahead and do the same to that. So apply a little bit of solder and some heat and fuse those together. And then finally they're just the other set of grounds here which need to be fused together. So now it's really important that the part here which connects it up with the white wire and the part which connects with the red wire, that they don't touch each other, and also that they don't touch anything else that's inside this box. So I'm going to put a piece of heat shrink on here like this and melt that on there so it's not going to make contact with anything. And I'll do the same with the red as well. And using my heat gun, I'll melt those on there. So I spent a moment with my multimeter making sure everything was connected up properly, nothing was touching each other on the other end. And now I'm ready to seal this back up. So I'll put that little piece of red paper back in there and make sure I got the right side of cap, the one with the side filed that corresponds with that one there. Then I can take my little screws and seal everything back together. Ideally I would have liked to use this thicker cable for connecting up with the second one instead of this thinner one, but as you can see, the thick one and the thin one can just barely fit in there, and there's no chance that two of these thick ones would have been able to fit inside there. So I've clipped this wire to be about the right length so that there's a good generous amount of curve on there, and I've also stripped back the ends on here, much the same as I did on the other side. And what I'm going to be doing is this grounding center part is going to go to this lead here, and because I'm turning a stereo jack into a mono jack, I'm also going to solder this wire down to the main part of the connector here, and then this other part here, it's going to go through that center piece right there and connect up with the end, and this is going to be the left jack. And then I'll just push the other lead down through there like that, and with my tweezers I'll bend those strands up so they'll be up here like that. And then I'll apply some flux to that, and I'll take my soldering iron and apply some solder, and then with my screwdriver I'll push down on this lead, this connection down here. And in this case, because there's only these two surfaces in here and I've got my little piece of red paper here, I'm not going to bother putting any heat shrink over that. Now because this wire is quite a bit thinner than what we used over here, when I put the lid on, it's actually not going to clamp down at all on this wire, and that'll mean if this ever gets pulled, it'll be pulling right on these solder joints, which I prefer not to have. So what I'm going to do is I took a piece of the insulation that went on the other, on this other type of wire, and I've slit it. I've cut a little slot in the middle of it, and I'm going to wrap that around here like that, and then when I close it, it's going to be pressing down on this rubber, which will then apply pressure to this smaller wire here and should again provide some strain relief and protect these solder joints. Alright, so I used my multimeter quickly to test and make sure everything was connected correctly on the other end. So now I can put my little piece of red paper back on there and drop this top back on and put my screws back in. And now there we have it. This end is now complete and it looks very similar to the other one that I already created. I guess all that's left would be to label these the right channel and the left channel. Alright, so now moving on to the other end for the 3.5mm jack. So this will be going through here through this strain relief, and when I built the first one, I discovered that this is a very tight squeeze, and I tried forcing it through, and it seemed to work at first, but then eventually this strain relief just got broken off. For this one, I'm just going to cut it off to begin with, as opposed to going through that struggle as I did last time. It also caused some problems with the cable because it was kind of stretching the rubber while I was pulling it over. So the rubber was kind of sticking out further than I wanted, so I was removing parts of the insulation, but then it was getting pushed up again when I pull the strain relief over. So I'm just going to cut this thing off, and I'm actually going to drill this out a little bit bigger so that this cable can fit through easily. I figure that this cable is nice and thick and it has lots of rubber on it, that should be good enough strain relief on its own. So I'll just cut this off with my pair of scissors here. Alright, so with that drilled out, now this fits very comfortably through there. It's not binding and pulling on the rubber, so that should be really good. So I'm going to put this on. Of course, you want to always remember you put this on, thread it onto the cable before you solder these ends on, because this needs to thread back in from this end, and it's a common thing to forget that and have a cable without that thing there and have to unsolder everything and start all over. But I remembered. So now what I've got to do is I've got to strip back these wires, and I'm going to solder them onto here and try and double check and remember that the one that goes connecting up at the end should be the left one. The one that connects up at the middle there, that's going to be the right side, and then the base here will be the ground. So I think I want to remove about this much insulation, because this is a much smaller jack and there's not very much slack, so you really don't want to expose too much wire, because that's just going to get in the way when you try and seal it all up again. Just like before, I'm going to use my utility knife to very carefully cut through here. Go all the way around. You don't want to go all the way through and actually feel the metal of the wires, because that means you could be cutting them. So you want to just kind of skim the surface, and then when you twist the end, that'll break the remaining part of rubber that you didn't cut through yet. So I've got that like that, and I'll just twist that end like so, and there we go. Now we've just broken off that end part there. So I will pull off all of these wires to one side this time. I'm not going to be, having this go off to another cable inside of here. It's just going to go, all the grounds are going to go straight to this part here, this little hole that's right there. Alright, so now I'll take my scissors and clip off the foil and the string to get out of my way here. So that's going to go in there like that. I just need to strip off a little bit from the red and a little bit from the white. And I really haven't exposed very much on the ends there, but this is a very small connector, so we don't really need to expose too much. Since everything was really small and very fiddly, I didn't film while I was soldering this connector together, but essentially it's the same as the other, just everything's a lot smaller. The white wire went through the loop that was here, and I applied some solder. Then after I had soldered that, I then worried about the red wire and inserted it through this leg over here, and then over on the back I inserted the grounding part for the back here across the outside, and then I soldered that down as well. One of the main reasons why I wanted to open up this hole here was that so I'd still be able to spin this without also spinning the rubber if there was too much friction there. So should be able to do that now. And now that end is all fully together and we can do some tests. So my cable's finished, but before I'm going to test it in the actual instrument, I want to do a couple checks to make sure everything's wired correctly beforehand. So I created this very simple continuity tester. I've got two AA batteries wired with a very small buzzer here, and when I tap these two ends together, it makes a beeping sound, so I can use that to do a continuity check on here. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to check are the grounds. So the ground would be this part here that's the very closest to where it connects to the wire. And that should be common to both of these for this section here as well as this section here, and the same on the other cable because the ground should be common to both. They share a common wire. So I will just hold this wire up against here only on that part near the edge, and then with my other hand I'll take this wire and I'll tap it on here, and we're hearing a beep, and I'll try here as well. And there's also a beep there, and of course we're checking those together because we've converted this stereo cable to a mono cable. I'll do the same on the other side as well. That's working, and so is that as well. Now we also want to make sure there's no bleed through from the ground to the two tips on both of these sides, so I'll check that as well. And there's no beep. And I'll try that on this side. And there's no beep there as well. So no bleed through, but now we got to check and make sure that the wire is continuous for the other two parts. So the convention on these 3.5 millimeter cables is that this center part here, this corresponds with the right side, and this one corresponds with the left side, or the left track. So I am going to check the right side first, which is the one that I've labeled here as the right one, and I'll hold this piece of wire only on that middle part there very carefully so it doesn't touch the others. And now with my other end of here, I'm going to tap the end of the right cable on there. And we can hear the buzzer. Now I'm going to check and make sure that the right channel is not also wired up to the left channel, so I'll test that side too. And I'm not hearing anything, so that's working properly. Alright, so now I'm going to check and make sure the left side is working as well. So that would correspond with the very tip of the 3.5 millimeter one. So I'll just hold this wire on there like that, and then with my other hand I'll tap on the very tip, and that's on the left side, so that is working correctly. And again, I'll just, for proof of concept, I'll also check the left hand or the right side, and that one's not doing that. So it looks like I've wired it correctly, so I can now plug it all in and do a test with the actual piano. Alright, so now I've got both sets of cables plugged into the back of the piano. The one coming from the output, it comes over along here, and it connects up with the line in on the back of the computer so that the sound coming out of the piano can be recorded by the computer. And the other one goes from the speaker port on the back, and it comes back over to here to the input port so that the sound being played through the computer can be played through the speakers in the piano. Alright, so now I'm going to do a quick test to make sure this works. So I'm going to play a song on YouTube here, and at the same time I'm going to play around with the balance controls here on the computer. So right now I'm hearing it coming out of both speakers on this piano. But if I turn on the left side, I'm now only hearing it through the right speaker. Turn that back up, hearing it through both. Now if I turn down the right side, I'm only hearing it over there from the left side speaker. So it looks like I've got this part wired up correctly. Alright, so now we're going to verify and make sure that the line output from the piano is correctly going to the computer so I'll be able to record from here. So I've got Audacity launched here, and I'm just going to press record, and we'll do a little bit of a recording here. So I'll just play a little tune. I'll also do some other tests where I'll play a bunch of notes here at the bottom, and also a few that are up here at the top. Now the reason I did that last check there where I was hitting some notes at the top and hitting some notes at the bottom is because the way that this piano does stereo is that the notes which are near the top end of the scale, those come out more to the right side channel, and the ones that you're hitting, you know, further to the left side of the piano, the lower notes with your left hand, those ones come more through the left speaker. So you can see that the ones that we played that were low, these are larger on this side than they are on the right side, and over here you can see that the right side, these are significantly bigger than what you've got here. So it looks like it worked correctly. So anyway, that concludes this video. I recognize it's probably not that likely that too many people are going to need to create the exact custom cable that I created here today, But I hope this video at least showed you that it's really not that difficult to make something like this. And if you need to create some kind of a custom cable that has, specific ends on it for your particular purposes, I hope you've learned a few skills from watching this video here. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. And thanks for watching.